Kia ora, everyone. Thank you so much for coming along, and thanks for Mantel and Jerome and Will and all the team for setting this up. I think it's amazing that we've now got a GitHub user group. It feels like we should have had one 13 years ago when Jerome first got a GitHub account. Yeah, my name is Dan. I am a senior solution architect for working in AI at Microsoft. I was a developer for 15 years. Which means, when I say was, it means I still write code, I just don't push to production, which is so much relief. So when things go wrong, it's not my fault. I also write docs, a lot of docs for Microsoft. I also create a lot of architecture. I do a lot of different things for Microsoft. And what I wanted to share tonight is how I use GitHub Copilot, but also what I'd love to hear is if you are also using GitHub Copilot or a tool, doesn't have to be GitHub Copilot, how do you use it? What are the techniques you use these sorts of AI-driven tools? And I will give you a quick overview of Copilot, but I'm going to go down into some more prompt engineering techniques because my day job is working on prompt engineering and AI solutions. So, right. Just quick, before we kick off, Jerome talked about who's, you've got engineers, we've got architects. We've got any SRE? SRE, people, few SRE.
Hello.
Yeah, a few, yeah. So, yeah, many people in the room are actually using GitHub Copilot. Can I share the PowerPoint? I can indeed. Are you guys seeing, wait. Being online now? So far, you've not missed anything. Jerome, good?
Yeah, that's much better. That'll work better for the recording as well. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Okay, so yeah, who here is using GitHub Copilot? People, awesome. Who's using ChatGPT or another AI-driven tool? Wow. Okay, cool. So basically, I don't really need to tell any of you why AI-driven tools are making an impact, right? And so important for our workflow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on minutes of how it works, and then we're just going to show you prompts. I'm just going to go doing some prompt engineering. So the Copilot effect, we call it the Copilot effect. What is it really? It's just about staying in the flow. We all have a million responsibilities. We jump between things. We're constantly being hounded by our BA or our manager for what is that feature update, all the other things we had to do. So we often spend a lot of time on Stack Overflow, I'm sure, and other tools. All of these AI-driven tools, they are really designed for us to help stay in the flow. So we can do less of the boring, horrible stuff that we had to do, boilerplate code, looking up errors and issues. Our goal with these tools is to make it as simple for us as developers to focus on the really hard things, which is design, which is good engineering practices, security, all the other things we often have to push aside because we just have to write that feature. So that's what the Copilot effect is. But it has another outcome for us all, which is actually become happier developers. As I said, I don't have to push code to production, but I go home and I write code. I work on code at the office, and I enjoy it now. I kind of lost a little bit. But I go home and I find reasons to use GitHub Copilot. So I'm happy with it. So I'm happy. And look, notice there I say the developer, right? It's not, I've crossed out developer. It's not just, we've got data scientists using it. We've got developers, engineers, SRE, architect. I'm going to show you some architectural techniques you can use with these tools. So yeah, it is for so many people. All our docs team use GitHub Copilot. Okay, so for those who don't know what GitHub Copilot is, effectively it is an extension that sits inside your IDE of choice, and there's VS Code, IntelliJ, and NeoVim supported. And what it does is it looks at the context of what files and that are relevant to providing you with code suggestions. So what's happening is it's looking at the files you've got open, it's looking at the files that you're working on, it's looking at the context around you and building up a big prompt in the background and sending that to a large language model. And the case is either GPT 3.5 Turbo or 4 Turbo depending on the feature. And that response gets sent to the model. Is not used to train. It comes back with a suggestion, which then gets either put in line with your code as you're writing in your IDE, or it gets put into the chat. Right? But the key here is the context. Right? If you use something like ChatGPT, and it's amazing, it's using the same models, it doesn't have the context of all the files that you've got in your editor, and that's really important. Right, so that context is super important. You can do all this in ChatGPT. Don't get me wrong. If you're using it, use it. But it's this staying in the flow. So I'm going to do a bunch of demos. This is how I use GitHub Copilot. As I said, it doesn't have to apply to you. You might have a completely different style that you need to do. But I am going to be using C#. I was going to use some PowerShell, but I don't think we're going to have time. So I'm just going to do C#. Now, anything is going to work. Pretty much any language that's got some code that was built. The model was aware and seen. Don't worry if you don't know C#. Hopefully, you'll just get the gist of this. If you use Java or you use JavaScript, TypeScript, Rust, anything. Even COBOL. Yes, it does use COBOL. We'll COBOL. The patterns I'm using are for typical large-scale application development. You often see a lot of examples where it's like, create a tic-tac-toe program. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But who really needs to do that beyond the demo? So we're going to do some really real stuff. I'm using VS Code. As I said, you can use lots of things, but VS Code is what I tend to use. I did pray to the demo gods. We're all familiar with that. But this is non-deterministic technology, which means every time I do this, it's going to give me slightly different. It's going to work slightly differently. So things are going to go wrong. That's my job as an engineer, is now to the model prompt the tool to give me the answer I need. Because often the model doesn't really know anything about us. It's not like it's been trained on who David is. It's not like it's been trained on the code you like to write and the packages and the patterns you like to write. Yes, it's looking at what's open in the IDE, but it really knows nothing about you. And even after you interact with it once, it doesn't know anything about you. So you have to give it the context. And often that's what I'm going to try and help everyone look at, is what context could I really bring? So get into it. Tests. Yes, I forgot. We didn't ask if there was any Q&A and testers in the room. Anyone? Hey. And we got some QA, right? Write tests. I'm a software engineer. We all write tests. So we all hate writing tests, by the way. So how can we write tests with this? How can we actually write better tests? So let me see. Now you're going to see me do lots of copy and pasting because you don't want to see me typing a lot. So I might scroll that and make this a bit bigger for you. Check. But how's everyone able to see that all right?
No.
You know what? I'll do that. How's that? Okay. I have a Visual Studio project open here. I haven't. Oh, wow. That is my failure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for pointing that out to me.
That's why we couldn't see it.
See it, so I'm going to just stop I'm going to do that. That's my. This is. You're going to see this a lot. These are my. So this is Visual Studio Code. If you're not familiar with it, I'm sure you're familiar with other IDEs. I have installed in the extensions the GitHub Copilot extension. It's already there. GitHub Copilot Chat. Blah blah blah. That is the extension I've used. GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. Chat is a feature of Copilot. We'll talk about that in a minute. I have got a C# set of C# projects here. You don't need to worry about exactly what these are. If you're not familiar, no big deal. What I have got is an API controller. This is a REST API. This is going to expose a REST API as part of my application. I've got a whole bunch of code that I've written. Documentation, look at me. How often do we take some code we've written previously and replicate it or a different repository or different API, etc. So what I want to do first is I want to show you a technique which is basically replicating a pattern. So I want to go and create a new control. Now I'm over here in the GitHub chat. Remember I talked about context because this account controller.cs file is open. GitHub's inferred context. So I'm going to go create a new what do I want to say? What do I call it? A new tenant controller. Based on the pattern, and I'm going to use this thing called a file link, which I will type file, and it will say which based on the pattern in account controller. But I want you to use the file. This is this context tenant.
Do you need it to be tenant versus tenant?
It's the good thing is it won't actually. Well, it's probably gonna. That's a good point. It probably will give me probably be very 10. All the pressure I can't spell. So what I'm doing here is I'm not relying on GitHub Copilot, sorry, the IDE extension to figure out what things I want. I'm telling it. So I'm going to go and run that. Here's the fun bit where it's probably all going to go wrong. So what it's going to do is it's going to tell me exactly what it's doing. It is now creating all the code for me based on the pattern that I specified. If you just ask, give me a tenant controller, I'm going to give you a tenant controller. It might not be the pattern, might not mimic the code you need, you like. So great, I've got that. We'll let it create. Now, interestingly enough, if I was to let Copilot, I could write some stuff over here in the actual editor, and Copilot would start completing it for me. That is using a GPT-3.5 Turbo model, which is an awesome model. But if I use the chat, it actually uses GPT-4 Turbo, which is a newer, more capable model. So I tend to lean on the chat because I love the code that it gets me. So now I've got all this code, la-di-da-di-da, lovely. It's probably great. I'm going to set into a new file. And now I will save that file. Just call it, Copilot doesn't create my file names for me. My controller. Now I've got my tenant controller. Now, next do. What should I have actually done? Anyone here want to tell me what I should have done before I wrote my code?
Yes.
Yeah, right, test. Thank you, test-driven development. Yeah, I should have done that. Didn't. But what was the answer? Tests. I should have written my tests. Use my test to validate my code, but I didn't because I'm lazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, create some tests. Let me make unit tests. Tests for the file. Again, a tenant controller. Passing these on the tests they wrote in. Again, I will call this we think they are the account controller tests. So I like to use the AAA pattern, if you're familiar with that, which is just a style of writing tests. And I could show you those actually. I did have those sitting up here. So that you know what I'm right. Here's my account controller tests. So the AAA pattern here, which is the arrange, act, and assert. If you ask Copilot, write some tests, it's probably not going to use this pattern. It might not use fluent assertions. It might not use the packages you need because I haven't given it context. But I'm going to say copy basically mimic this. So what it's going to do is it's going to use those relevant files that I've specified, and it's going to write tests basically that almost the same, but tests that. Now, what I didn't show you, and I will quickly show you.
That saves you having to decipher what you did before, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste.
Well, that's you've jumped ahead, David. So jumped ahead. You always do that. David's always one step ahead of me. If my code was wrong, if I wrote a bug in my code, right? I've had my tests are too long. I might break this down. What I might do, and I'm going to clear this. I'll just type clear command. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my account controller. What happens when you don't have enough screen real estate?
And you pay more for a bigger limit?
No, that is based on the model. Not right now, at least, not that I'm aware of. That's a good question. And yeah, it's based on the model that's underneath it, which is 128K tokens for a GPT-4 Turbo. What I'm going to do I'm going to do a bug. Create a bug. Okay. That is clearly a logic bug. Now this is something that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. If I was to just write tests for this code, I would be writing tests for function, not intent. Right? We test intent, not function, which means we're trying to test, is the code I wrote actually what I wanted to happen? We're gonna get Copilot, and I'm gonna copy and paste my prompt here because it's a bit longer. This is what we do, especially as senior engineers, is we want to. Right. Oops, no. So I'm similar prompt, right? I'm saying file. I'm gonna actually have to, when you copy and paste, you actually have to do this. You'll see this is annoying, but same pattern for a file using the same pattern as the controller, using the same pattern as a count controller. Controller tests. Right, now I've asked it to give me some more text, but I said test intent of the code rather than the implementation. Writing these tests, and what it's actually going to do is it's going to give me, hopefully, and this doesn't always work, but it's at some point we'll get a very, very reliable state. It actually will write the test that actually will fail because my code is bad. It's testing the intent because it's looked at the documentation I've got, it's looked at the name of the method, it's looked at things like that, and it's actually going to. Now, what I can then do is do a follow-up prompt. My favorite follow-up prompt, which is the above tests. I haven't written these tests. Are you expecting any of them to fail? I haven't run this code. Now, yes, the best way to test that would be to run it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. Tenant controller test. This is where it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Hopefully, it's going to say, no, actually, listen. Okay, so now told me that I have a logic flaw, a logic bug in my code. This is something you're not going to get with ChatGPT directly. It's not going to get that context of all the things that are around it. So I've got a logic bug. So great. Now, I didn't run the code. Run the code, but now one other thing. How do I make the code more testable? Testable code is super important, you know. Do that. Now it's actually using the previous chat history as well. So it's not just using my code, you know, what I've asked from the prompt, it's using the previous chat. So it knows that we've already, you know, how I've defined the test. So it's going to change my code. It'll actually make recommendations, not just to my tests, but to the underlying under test. For example, it will go, well, you know, you're not using dependency injection, you're not using, you know, you should have an interface here rather than you should have ISP, interface segregation. All this stuff will be, I don't have to be an expert in all this stuff. And I recommend to any senior engineer, the value you're going to get is not from you necessarily using this tool. It's to help your junior engineers write better code so that when time comes for you to review it, which you will, of course you do, every senior engineer who reviews all the junior code, it's so much easier. You know the code is going to, and they're going to learn so much because it's going to explain to me why I should do something. So super useful. Okay.
Question.
Yeah, David.
You said the word intent or intend before?
Intent.
Yeah. So is there any other words to make that definition closer or less than?
You mean when I write the prompt?
Yeah. It's like obviously you've used that word. Is that part of Copilot?
No, that's not a Copilot specific term. Copilot, the large language model that underpins it, is quite trained on a corpus of data which understands semantics. And if I was to say intend, it would probably infer that those are the same thing.
Because that to me would suggest like 95%, right?
Yeah. Now, I realize I'm way over time, so I'm going to try and rush through this. So tests, we love this. RegEx. We love RegEx. Who here loves RegEx? We all love RegEx. Oh, Chimes does not love RegEx. I think that's probably not true. I'm going to quickly. I've got a class here. There's simply a model. Yep, great. We've all seen models before. I'm going to add some regex to it. Here's my location model. No, I deleted all my properties, so I'm going to add those properties in. I had a whole bunch of phone numbers, so I'm just going to use traditional Copilot. Phone number. I'm just going to do it this way. I have to do it this way, but it's figured out that I'm talking about location. Yeah, fine. I had all this in here and I deleted it. I forgot. From my prep, I deleted all this. So that's okay. Easy enough to create it again. And I'm going to just select all this and I'm going to say, I don't actually need just create. Okay. So what I'm going to do, select this, and I'm going to say create regex validation on. Because I've got this file open, I've got the text selected. It's going to go, okay, I figure out what you mean. I can now go and grab that. I could. I want to tell me anyone who's got their regex socks on what thing is really failing at typing. Yep, I've totally failed at typing. I'll kind of figure out what I need. So what's the problem? That is not going to validate a New Zealand phone number. That's going to validate a US phone number. So I'm going to go, I like this, make get Kiwi as so this is about setting context. On phone number. A little Copilot thing down the bottom, but I can't see it. Cool. Tell it over here. Make the validation Kiwi.
Well, I understand.
So now it's scoped it to a New Zealand phone number. So again, this is about context setting. We can do a whole lot of other stuff, and I just don't have time. I can share my demo scripts with everyone if they want to. But another thing you can do, which would be, hey, give me regex that will extract all the providers from Terraform file. Now, I don't have to give it an example of what a Terraform file is. It knows what a Terraform file looks like. So I would be able to specify the Copilot use its own knowledge about file structures to create regexes for me. So that's super handy. I use that all the time. Okay. Let me see where I'm at. Okay. Everyone here, most people here, or some of people here, familiar with Solid principles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So single responsibility, open close, space segregation. Yeah, we're going to list them up. This is another technique that we really need to always apply to our code. Right? We need to make sure our code meets these sorts of practices and patterns. So Copilot can help us or help our junior devs as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my account controller. Right. And I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to get a prompt because I'm being lazy again. How would I have refactored this code to meet solid principles? Okay. Select it, just make sure it's context that I'm selecting.
Luke says insert CrowdStrike deploy.
Too soon, Luke, too soon.
He actually said too soon, question mark.
I didn't see that, but yeah. So yeah, okay. So it's given me, it said you should have implemented a interface here. It's given me a whole bunch of guidance. Now, this is amazing for a junior developer because it gives them an explanation of what this sort of thing does. So I have a suite of prompts that I sort of share with developers I'm working with and say, you know, these are the sorts of things you could do to help you sort of understand what you might, how you might refactor your code. I'm going to open up another file and I'm going to do some factoring for performance. Now, this code is terrible. When I was coding this, I thought I need to write some sub-performant code. So I took the code, I got GitHub Copilot to refactor it to be bad performance. Didn't you know that? I don't think that's a useful thing to do, but in this case it was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, how could I make the selected code more performant? Give me a bunch of recommendations. It's going to read and rewrite my code for optimized code. How many people do actually read their code and go, could I get a little bit of performance out of that? Kind of don't need to worry most of the time, but when you're writing, you know, production enterprise code where there is hundreds of thousands of users hitting the system at once, you need to write high performance code. So
Milliseconds make a difference.
yeah, every second counts, especially when you're paying for the compute. So that's another one. Really rushing through them. DevOps. I did some awesome stuff. Obviously, there's a bunch of people who are interested in DevOps. GitHub is a big part of that. I use it to create infrastructure as code. When we develop an architecture, we often create reference architectures at Microsoft, and then we will produce Terraform and bicep code to help people deploy that. So I'm going to show you a little trick. This is, I bet you never thought that I was going to open Copilot, not GitHub Copilot. Okay, this is a trick I use. Now I already did this prompt earlier, and let's see if it's going to show me that. But I'm going to go show you a very much more complicated prompt. This is something I do every day. I'm not a platform. Okay, here's my prompt. I am an SRE platform engineer creating Terraform for Azure architecture. I don't have to be Azure. I would like you to help me identify the services and the relationships. Now, I am going to say for each service, I want you to explain the relationships and all that stuff. But I'm going to upload a file. There is an architecture diagram. It could be handwritten. Times we get a handwritten architecture, we have to turn it into real code. So what I'm going to do, so it's going to come out and give me blurring the faces. That's nice. Shouldn't have faces in my architecture. It's going to go and give me that list I want. Working really hard because this is a multimodal model. So now it's nice. It's going to give me all this. It's told me all of this stuff. It's given. I asked it to give me a recommendation. Should I put the Terraform in one module or a separate module? What would be a better design pattern? So I've asked for more than just the description and the relationships. Now I could go and then copy this. I actually have previously done this. So I've now got a following prompt. And this one I'm going to put into GitHub Copilot. So all of this text you're seeing here, I will zoom it in. That's what Microsoft Copilot gave me, because it's a multimodal model, meaning I can put images in, which is what I needed to translate it. But I'm now going to give this to Copilot so that it can give me, you know, again, I'm an SRE platform engineer, creating Terraform, blah, blah, blah. I've explained the context, and I'm now going to put that in to this. I'll do it again. It's a long prompt, but you notice it's using Markdown. It loves Markdown. It's nice that translated that for me. So now I asked it, give me a file structure, not just the files, but here's the file structure. It's going to create each of those files for me. It's not going to be perfect. I would go through and edit this, but it's certainly going to save me a lot of time. especially if I'm doing this a few times a day or week. You know, I know Will on the call probably does this many times and Ahmed a lot. So this is the sort of thing that we can do to really accelerate ourselves. It's not ever going to be perfect because it doesn't have that context. Okay, we're just about at the end. I'm sorry I've gone long. I will do want to quickly, another demo for any DevOps people in the room. I have another file here. I have a GitHub Actions workflow that, of course, many of you have used in GitHub Actions or even something similar you would have seen, right? This pushes a container, or builds a container, I'm sorry, pushes it to an Azure Container Registry. I want to convert this. I want to go and say, convert this GitHub Actions workflow to use a matrix build. Now, matrix build is basically where we might want to build multiple things or assets at the same time, all in parallel, and this will convert that. Now, here we go. Because I can never remember the structure for a matrix build. Again, stay in the flow. I can look it up. It will go and change that. Now I've got structure. I go get edited. All right, last one. So techniques for architects and senior developers. I have not forgotten all the architects and senior developers in the room. I'm going to give you one last prompt. I do have two, but I'm going to give you one. So this is a prompt engineering technique that if you are at all using AI or thinking about AI, it is called a expert critique. So an expert critique is where you ask the model to pretend it's actually an expert in something and to provide you guidance based on that area of expertise. Pick your favorite developer, Ada Lovelace or Martin Fowler. I've used Martin Fowler because he wrote I quite enjoy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that prompt and I'm going to get him to get GitHub Copilot to pretend that I am. Now remember, we've got to just change that. So file, repository. I'm in the wrong file. Sorry. What am I doing? Paste that. Repository. So what it's doing is it's going to say, okay, I'm pretending to be Martin Fowler. I've written a lot of books on code and good design. I could say Gang of Four and sorts of things, and it's going to give me a whole bunch of recommendations. Now, I'm going to give you one final prompt here, which is, imagine you're a DevOps expert. Now, it's given me a whole bunch of recommendations and explained exactly why they're important, how I might use them. I'm going to use another critique. But this time it's Jen Kim. Jen Kim is the creator of the of many books, such as the Phoenix Project. And if you haven't read it, you should do so. I'm going to get Jen Kim to critique Martin Fowler's recommendations.
Tell you a ticket for the DevOps Summit.
Exactly. And he's going to give some counter arguments, give some counterpoints, how you might write more moderable code, you might focus on other things. So these are all techniques. I don't want anyone to go away and say, that I'm telling you that you should use these things. What I want you to think about is everyone's got their own ways of using these tools. These tools are so amazingly powerful. They can help us with so many things. Find what works for you, share them with us. And as Jerome said, we would love to hear how you're using these sorts of tools because we can all learn from each other. And I think that's the real value, as Jerome said. So hopefully you've taken away some useful things, some way to try, some useful tools and tips. I usually put my repos on GitHub. I haven't yet because I wrote this all last night, and that's why everything's a bit last minute. So I'm going to wrap it. We're way over. I appreciate you all staying around. Jerome, do you want to close us out?
Thank you very much for that, Dan. Everybody just take a deep breath in, because that was so much information in so much time. Thank you so much for that, Daniel. I think there's something out of that for everybody that we can take away. Let's sort of finish up there. We have run over time, but thank you for bearing with us. I'm happy to say this because I don't have to hang around and I'm not being kicked out kind of thing, but stick around, have some time of networking and talking to one another, ask questions on the way through, at least until the Microsoft guys decide that, no, they want to get home and shuffle everybody out. Again, thank you guys and girls and ladies, gents, for coming along, making the time out on a cool Wednesday evening to come and network and to learn. We do want to hear your feedback. We do want to hear your suggestions and love you guys to present. They don't have to be as dense as what we've presented today. It can be one thing that you have found that you think somebody else probably doesn't know that you're willing to share with somebody. That makes for a great talk because then somebody can walk away having learned something after that. So I'll send that link out afterwards. If there are any questions, hit us up through Meetup. My contact details are there via GitHub and so forth. We'd love to hear from you guys. And again, thank you so much for coming. And Will, Daniel, Chimes, and all those who have helped to put it on tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.